All right, we'll get started, Mark.
Okay.
So today's track is digital transformation. The topic is Business Improvement Einstein's Way by Mark James. Welcome, Mark.
Cool.
Mark is the founder and president of Performance Advisors Group, Inc., an accomplished business improvement advisor and speaker. Mark leverages 45 years of experience in helping businesses in diverse industries to eliminate barriers towards sustainable growth and competitive advantage. I'll review very quickly some housekeeping. So this session is for 45 minutes from start to finish, and we shall be taking up your questions after Mark delivers his talk. So please keep your questions coming through the chat window. And if you're not able to take all the questions, then those questions will be forwarded to Mark for him to answer later. So welcome, Mark, and take it away from here.
Thank you very much, Yoba. I appreciate that. Well, welcome, everyone. Happy to be here. Let me start by asking a question. If you could, would you travel into the future? How far would you go? What would you want to see? And would you be prepared for what you do see? Once upon a time, a very curious 16-year-old Albert Einstein imagined he was chasing a beam of light. It was a thought experiment. And he would go on to conduct many thought experiments that would lead to historic discoveries. And one of those discoveries is that time is not absolute. It's relative. Time actually slows as you travel faster. In fact, the 1971 experiment proved it, where an atomic clock was placed on Earth and another on a plane that circled the globe several times. When compared, the time on the clock in the plane was slightly less than the clock on Earth. Time had indeed moved slower on the plane relative to Earth. Now, the difference was very tiny, but imagine for a moment if we could travel into space near the speed of light. Then the passage of time relative to those on Earth would slow dramatically. And when we return, time on Earth moved much farther into the future compared to the time we experienced traveling near the speed of light. Years, centuries, or millennia would pass on Earth while we would experience a fraction of that time. This is how Einstein described that time travel is possible. But when it comes to your business and life, I contend that you don't need to travel into the future to prepare for it. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. I'm going to show you how to leverage Einstein's genius to prepare your business for the future. And I promise you one thing up front here, it's not rocket science. Here's what I'm going to cover today. You're going to learn how to apply Einstein's thinking to your business and how to eliminate barriers as a result and get those things that get in the way that any business can encounter. I'm going to talk about those in a minute. How to uncover opportunities using his approach to thinking. And I'm going to talk to you about two truths of human behavior that you can make your ally in running a business and making it more effective. Now, Einstein's genius regarding physics is well known. But lesser known, though, are three rules about his work. First, out of clutter, find simplicity. Second, from discord, make harmony. And third, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And when these rules first caught my eye, I did some research and I discovered they're not Einstein's actual words. They're from a 1979 article where physicist John Wheeler attributed them to how Einstein did his thinking and his work. And as I read them for the first time, I realized, these can work in our lives and our work to visualize and fix barriers that inevitably get in the way. It's natural to concentrate on keeping things in a business running every day, but over time, complexity and discord can get in the way and opportunities will go missing. So now is the perfect time to apply Einstein's rules to fix barriers that are in the way, clean up clutter, separate what's working from what's not, and to expose hidden opportunities. Let's look at some very common barriers that I think you'll recognize, and then I'll discuss how any business can and should use these rules to eliminate them. You have to clearly visualize what's in the way before you can fix it. And if you experience or have seen any of these in your business or anything along your professional path, you're not alone. Every business struggles to solve barriers like these from time to time. Let me comment about some of these before I get into solutions. Poor communication is a very common and destructive barrier. If we recall from the laws of physics, nature doesn't like a vacuum. I would contend that in business it's the same because absent clear communication, things tend to become cluttered and inaccurate. For example, research by the Conference Board a few years ago found that for a typical organization, two-thirds of the employees are only one-third as productive as they could be because they don't understand what they're being asked to do. Let me repeat that because I just threw a lot of fractions at you. Conference Board research, typical organization, nearly two-thirds of the employees are only 33% as productive as they could be because they don't understand what they're being asked to do. Furthermore, Human Capital League research, again for a typical organization, found that only 42% of employees know their own organization's mission, vision, and core values. What do I mean by perfection obsession? As you see on the screen here. Well, perfection is a noble outcome, but being obsessed with achieving perfection can get in the way of actually getting the job done. Technomania is believing that technology can solve everything. It cannot. And I contend, there's one example I can cite that to prove my point. I have yet to encounter any technology that can overcome an employee who does not make a customer feel welcome or appreciated. Things like ineffective marketing waste time and money, and poor processes, politics, sacred cows and silos complicate things and kill harmony wherever they exist. They can cause as much as 50 to 75% of the activity that employees perform in the job in a typical business to add zero value to the final outcome. Now, Einstein's way of thinking was about making the complex simple. He was a master at it. His theory of relativity predicted some true phenomena, like time dilation and the fact that solid objects actually change their shapes at high speeds. But if you read Einstein's original paper on relativity from 1905, it's pretty straightforward. His text is plain and clear, and his equations are mostly algebra that you can find in a high school textbook. You see, fancy math was not the point for Einstein. He liked to think visually, thinking up experiments in his mind eye and then working them around in his head until he could see the ideas and physical principles with crystal clarity. I contend that we too can visualize and work things around in our head or on paper to avoid complicating things. Here I'm reminded of what James Clear said in his book Atomic Habits. He said, quote, "You do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems," unquote. Replacing clutter with simplicity gives you time to find and build better ways of doing things. Remember what I said about 50 to 75% of the employee activity adding no value in an organization? Well, the solution is not just about doing more with less. When you eliminate clutter that's soaking up time, people's time and energy, it allows you to do more with what you already have. So here are some specific ways to clear up clutter. And think about how these can simplify what your business done. First off, examine how work gets done. Confirm what's necessary for the job and what's not. I'm going to give you my quick 30-second overview of business process improvement. I don't need to convince any of you what that's all about. You all know it very well, and you practice it every day more than likely. But it's remarkably simple if you strip it all away. For each step of a process, we're asking two things. What is being done here? By who? For who? And most importantly, why? And then secondly, does this step get us closer to our goals? You then use the answers to get rid of what's not necessary, like sacred cows, which are those things that everybody is pretending to be necessary, but they're really not. Does the technology you use support the business and the customer experience? Remember what I said about technomania. It's important to resist the temptation to over rely on technology. Trying to perfect or digitize everything with technology does not in itself guarantee success. Don't jeopardize the deep roots and relationship you have with your internal and external communities and groups of people you serve. Carefully evaluate how technology can enhance the customer experience without losing the human touch. Core values, mission, and vision are the whys of your business. They tell everyone what's important and where to focus time and energy, but not everyone may know them. If less than half of employees, according to that Conference Board research, know their own organization's values, mission, and vision, it's kind of impossible for them to deliver on these whys if they don't know or understand them. So now would be a very good time to reintroduce core values, mission, and vision in your organization. And don't let messages about them get lost competing for attention with everything else. You can reduce distractions and confusion by eliminating key results measures to 3 to 5 maximum for any individual or team. This is based on research from the Workforce Accountability Study, where they found that organizations with a few memorable, meaningful key results reduce employee confusion to nearly zero, but you have to limit the number. Now, marketing can be cluttered as well. I see it all the time. Marketing is really a simple formula. It's common sense combined with a purpose and a method. And there are 5 foundational principles that comprise the common sense part of the marketing formula. And you can use these principles to clear clutter in your marketing effort. Principle number 1 is to think holistically about your marketing. See the whole marketing picture, not its individual parts. I see organizations all the time fixate on what I call shiny keys. Like, well, we got to do SEO because everybody's doing SEO. We got to get into social media and do Facebook because everybody else is doing Facebook. Well, maybe, maybe not. The key is to start and always think holistically about your marketing rather than over focusing on one individual part of it. Principle number 2 is to have a plan. Winging it doesn't work. A good plan is the method in the marketing equation. Number 3, it's important to be patient, to allow your marketing the time it needs to work. I get it. There's always pressure to deliver results sooner than later. However, the reality is you cannot rush great marketing. So patience is definitely a virtue when it comes to marketing. Number 4, use data. Your marketing should constantly evolve as you increase knowledge and interact with customers. Good data and analytics enable you to continuously refine your marketing message to deliver the right message to the right buyer at the right time at the lowest cost. And principle number 5 is to be relevant. You must demonstrate you know what's important to customers. And I've got a blunt reality for you here. The reality is that customers don't care about you and they don't care about me per se. They care about how we can solve their needs. So when you connect with the buyer's emotional state and their needs, you only need about 10% of the message to be about you to generate their interest, intent, and a purchase. I call it the 90-10 rule. Your marketing message should be about 90% of them and their needs and only about 10% about you and how that fits. And remember that one message does not fit all. For example, I would submit that you probably don't talk to your grandmother the same way you talk to your best friend. Now, discord happens when there's disagreement. And a key symptom is that when there's discord about is there's a temptation to prove someone or something else wrong. The opposite occurs when we have a state of harmony. Harmony is where people will help each other to make a difference together. That's my favorite definition of harmony. Let me repeat it. Harmony is a place where people help each other to make a difference together. Harmony reduces the temptation to prove something or someone else wrong. And where equally informed people seldom disagree, it's much easier to do work and to help each other. Here's some tips to put into action to achieve harmony. Number 1, encourage employees to be problem solvers. You see, problem solving breaks down problems into manageable chunks. It reduces the sense of overwhelm, which is a barrier in a lot of organizations. It definitely energizes accountability because people properly hired and properly selected and with the right knowledge they want to contribute, they want to be involved. So in a problem solving mode, it gives them a perfect opportunity to engage to do that. It also makes everyone in the team, for instance, easier to act. And there's a specific method I would mention here that you can use to get people into the problem solving mode. It's called the 1-3-1 method. It's not my idea, it's out there in the public domain, but I particularly like it here. When someone identifies a problem in an organization, generally the mode is they'll go to their supervisor or to someone and say, hey, we've got a problem. Well, the number one step, the first one in the 1-3 method is when a problem is identified, you ask the person who has identified the problem to define the problem, to be specific and get into specifics, as opposed to saying, hey, boss, we got a problem. What are we going to do? Put the onus back on the individual or the team to say, all right, let's examine the specifics of the problem. A machine is broken down on the production floor. Which machine? What specifically happened? Has it been making noise or is it causing problems up to now? So you want to get into specifics, get them to define the problem in their own minds. The three in the 1-3 method then is to then ask them, what are three options or alternatives that we should consider to solve the problem? And then the third thing to do, which is the second one on the 1-3-1, and this is the kicker one, and it may sound counterintuitive, is to ask the employee or the team, what do you recommend we do of these options? And quite often, what they recommend is the right course of action. Of course, as a leader or a supervisor or manager, that recommendation could be overridden because the manager may have some benefit of some information that the team does not. But quite often, more often than not, what they recommend is the right course of action. So the 1-3-1 method helps you to put people in that problem-solving mode. Now, also for yourself and your leadership team, it's important that they coach more and manage less. Good leaders and team members coach each other and coach the team. They recognize their primary responsibility is to help people to be their best. They also make sure that expectations are clear to everyone. Back to that conference board research, make sure that people understand what they're being asked to do and how it fits into the big picture. They should be visible and available to employees like never before. They eliminate distractions that are keeping themselves from their team. And they give frequent and in-the-moment feedback whenever possible. I like to describe what I mean by that by thinking about the time between employees get feedback is the gap is described by how I'm holding my hands. You want to close that gap as closely as possible. And the best way to do it whenever possible is to give employees feedback in the moment as things are occurring. There's nothing wrong with an annual review, but if that's the only time that people are getting feedback on their job, that means for the other 364 days and 23 hours, they may be in the dark. So give feedback and close that gap in the moment wherever possible. It's also important when it comes to coaching is to emphasize positives over punishment. Yes, there'll be those inevitable situations where there needs to be a conversation about a negative outcome or performance. Those can't be ignored. But on the whole, it's important to emphasize positives over punishment. Think honey versus vinegar. And lastly, ask questions and listen a lot. And here I specifically recommend that you listen 1 minute longer when you're in a conversation with your team or you're a leader or a manager. You want to force yourself to listen 1 minute longer. It does a couple of things. Number one, it reinforces in the eyes and the mind of the person that you're engaging with that what they had to say to you is important because you're listening to them for that extra minute. And in that extra minute, secondly, you may learn something you didn't already know. So practice the 1 minute, listen 1 minute longer rule. Now, when it comes to employee attraction and retention, remember there are 5 questions that heavily influence people's engagement and performance on the job. And these questions are based on behavioral science, and they're always in the minds of employees. They're always looking for answers. They may not verbally verbalize these questions, but they're always looking for answers. And without the right answer to these questions, people will tend to fill in their own, which may lead to results that you may not want or need. So it's important to also think about these 5 questions and begin answering them in the recruitment and onboarding stages and continue to reinforce the right answers through an employee's entire time with the business. And here are those 5 questions. What should I do as an employee? It's important to be sure that people understand what they're being asked to do, back to that conference board of research. And that is more than just a written job description. Number 2, how should I do it? Here, there are obvious implications for learning and training and skills development of employees. But here's an important tip to keep in mind. It's not enough to put information in people's brains and get them to retain it to call training or a learning experience a success. If they don't have the confidence to use what they've learned, then the training's not succeeded. So it's learn, retain, and have the confidence to use it. That should define and how you evaluate your learning and skills development for your employees. The third question is what I call the performance question. How am I doing at it as an employee? And again, as I mentioned earlier, don't rely on an annual review only. Give them feedback in the moment whenever possible. The fourth question is the performance question. Hey, how am I doing at it? Here it's important, as they say, to not rely on an annual review. The fourth question, as I mentioned, I'm sorry, is the motivation question. Why should I do it? We could also state this one in, what's in it for me to do what you're asking me to do? Here, it's important to connect personal meaning to performance with using a good standard of recognition and incentives to make that personal connection between what they're doing and the goals of the organization and how and what it means to themselves and the organization. And number five, where am I going? What's my future here in this organization? Here, it's important to be transparent about opportunities and talk ways that employees can enhance their skills and their values. Remember, the key benefits of achieving harmony is a place where people will help each other to make a difference together and where equally informed people will seldom disagree. Customers will never love a company until the employees love it first. This is one of my favorite quotes from Simon Sinek. Culture is another factor that impacts employee engagement and attraction and retention. Every organization, every business has a culture. But here's the key question. Is the culture by chance or is it determined based on good choices? Chance invites trouble when it comes to culture. I liken it to giving whiskey and car keys to teenagers. What could go wrong with that, right? Chance invites trouble. Ignoring culture will undercut performance in your business's image. On the other hand, choice reinforces desired outcomes. And leaders or managers are huge factors in the creation of a company's culture. And to achieve that culture by choice, as I just said, there's no getting around the four ways that leaders and managers impact culture. And let's look at each one of these. And maybe as I go through these, think about how these are being done or not being done in your organization where opportunities lie. Number one, how leaders act and behave sets an inescapable example. Here I've got a favorite quote from Natalie Bacon. She said, quote, "Who you are is what you will attract. So how you show up is what you'll create more of," unquote. Being emotionally intelligent in your actions and behaviors as a team leader or a supervisor or just a member of a team will positively contribute to the right culture. Number two, what are leaders paying attention to? Leaders who ignore things because they're too busy will distract from the right culture. So again, what they pay attention to is what they'll get more of. What are managers rewarding and what are they punishing? In organizations, I've noticed there's a tendency to engage in a parent-child behavior pattern because many believe that the job of a leader is to make sure that people do right things in a certain way. I'm here to challenge that thinking. Instead, I would argue that the principal responsibility of a leader is to help people to be the best they can be, as opposed to merely directing traffic. Again, think honey instead of vinegar. Positive recognition is a much more powerful contributor to the right culture. And finally, how do leaders allocate their attention and the business's resources will also impact culture. The reality is that people will look to what leaders are devoting their time and attention to, and they'll allocate their time and attention in proportion. The reality is, if it's not important to leaders, it's not going to be important to anyone else. Here are some key signs of an ideal culture, and these are difficult to achieve in a culture by chance. So I recommend setting these as key goals in a culture by choice and use this list to verify or validate or evaluate your current culture to see if these are in place and where there might be gaps or opportunities. I want to point out specifically the one on the top. Periodic training and development is a sign of an ideal culture. So making sure there's a commitment to that is important. Einstein was right. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. He believed that opportunity exists in difficulty. I heard this great maxim recently that said that fear is oppositional to creativity. Fear keeps us imprisoned in old paradigms. On the other hand, thinking and acting anew are keys that unlock opportunities and enable us to escape old paradigms that are holding us back. Seeing opportunities is about thinking differently. Einstein also said once, the only source of knowledge is experience. And the reality is that big breaks often begin as problems. Yes, we should accept that some things are beyond our control, but it's important to have a mindset that's always looking for positives and new ways of thinking. Einstein described this new way of thinking as a state of creative immersion that utilizes learning, discovery, looking for things, and making sure that there are positive emotions afoot. His underlying belief was that the more creative ideas actually emerge from mistakes and failures. Business and life in general is about dealing with risk. Risk is a factor of the universe. It's present wherever opportunities exist. It's a sign that there's an opportunity. And the key is to take intelligent risks based on clear thinking, knowledge from experience, helping each other make a difference together, that definition of harmony I talked about, and making the complex simple. Now, opportunities bring about change, but change can trigger a fight, flight, or freeze response in people. See it all the time in organizations. But keep in mind this, it's not the change that triggers that fight, flight, or freeze response. It's a loss or the potential loss that people associate with the change that does cause them to do that. On the other hand, think about this. People will love change when it comes with a gain. For instance, who would refuse a winning lottery ticket? Now, because change can be unsettling to people, it's important to overcome resistance for it to be successful. And here's a simple formula to help guide a journey of change in an organization. And change is a journey, it's not an event. This is one of my favorite formulas to use when you're thinking about change management. Three variables need to be in place in order to overcome that resistance to change, that fight, flight, or freeze response. Number one, there needs to be a recognized dissatisfaction with the current state. Everybody must generally agree that we can't sustain the way we are. We need to be doing something different tomorrow than we're doing today. Number two variable, there needs to be a vision of the future in place. That to be state needs to be clearly identified and spelled out. And number three, the third variable is that there needs to be a concrete plan developed and in place in order to get to that vision. If all three of these variables are in place, then you will overcome resistance to change. Now, here's another way to think about managing change. In between the current state and the desired future state lies what I call the swamp of change. It's where your employers and you might get a little wet and dirty, figuratively speaking. Does anyone recall the legendary Ohio State football coach, Woody Hayes, and what he said about passing the football? He was not a big fan. He at one point said that when you pass the football, three things can happen and two of them are bad. Well, the same can happen in change. One bad outcome is the incomplete pass and change. It's where the organization and people embark on the journey of change, get out into the swamp of change, and everyone looks around and says, "This is dirty. This is unpleasant. I don't like this." And everybody in the organization snaps back to the old way of doing things. The change failed, incomplete pass. The worst of the two outcomes is the interception. Again, the organization and people get out into the swamp and change and get stuck there, neither going forward nor backwards. Chews up enormous amounts of resources and goodwill. Customers will begin to recognize there's a problem if they haven't already. Suppliers will begin to question things. Not a good situation. Interception, again, the change failed. The right outcome is a completed pass and change. That is getting to the new state and staying there with the minimum amount of time in the swamp of change. And you achieve that completed pass in change management with strong communication, transparency, and an actively managed plan, because change will not happen by itself, at least the desired change. One last thing to keep in mind about change. Managing the journey of change is another opportunity to lead by example. So encourage yourself to embrace change because change opens new doors and new ways to gain. I have one last tip before we go to Q&A. It's become more challenging than ever to stay focused on what's important. Things like working remotely and having a hybrid workforce has added unique distractions that we never saw until a few years ago. And in my 40 plus years helping businesses with workplace performance, I've observed these two truths about human behavior. Number one, what gets talked about in this world is what gets done. And number two, what gets measured in this world is what gets done. Turn these two truths into your ally. Talk about and measure things that are important. For example, imagine how more dialogue and focus on financial literacy would result in employees better understanding risk, the time value of money, and financial responsibility, not just for themselves, but for the organization. Final thought from Einstein. Everything in your life does so because of two things, something you did do or something you didn't do. The journey forward for you and your business will be determined by what you did or didn't do. The school gym in the northern Illinois town where I grew up had a quote from Grantland Rice, the well-known sports writer of the 20th century. He said at one point, quote, "When the one great scorer comes to write next to your name, he marks not that you won or lost, but how you played the game." The how is about what we do. Everything I talked about today are things you can do for your business and for you. And I'd like to end with a quick thought experiment before we go to Q&A. Please indulge me for a second and just close your eyes. Just close your eyes for a second here. And with your eyes closed, imagine like Einstein did when he was 13 years old, you're chasing a beam of light. Can you see it? That beam of light is leading you to think about things differently, to use learning and discovery and positive emotions to get rid of clutter, to replace discord with harmony, and to reveal those opportunities that do exist in your universe. You can open your eyes now. I wish you all the best as you prepare for the future. Now, I'm happy to do questions in a moment here, but I just want to review what I've just talked about and shared with you. How to apply Einstein's three rules to eliminate barriers and get those things out of the way that inevitably can impact any business. How to have the right mindset to uncover opportunities, and how to apply those two truths of human behavior. So with that, I'm happy to take questions. And as I do, you'll notice on the screen here, there's a QR code and also a link on the right. I would really appreciate as we do Q&A to please go to that QR code or that link and give me feedback on my talk today. I'm always looking for ways to improve. I'm a big believer in continuous improvement, like I know all of you are. So I would very much appreciate and value your insights. So with that, Joel, I'm open for questions.
All right, thanks, Mark. That was a wonderful presentation. I don't have questions per se, but I have a couple of comments for you.
Okay.
So on your change management slide, there was a comment that somebody said that they'll be teaching that in their class tonight in the MBA class. And then a follow-up comment was that the Nostro model for managing complex change is something they like to use to think about what is needed for change to be successful.
Yes.
So do you have anything more to add on that?
Yeah, I do. There are actually four critical success factors to change. And I alluded to a couple of them, but I'll give you all four. Number one, you've got to make sure that everybody is on board and aligned for the change journey. Everybody has to realize and agree that we've got that dissatisfaction going on and how everybody can fit into it. So there needs to be alignment around that. There needs to be that plan in place to actively management. The third thing you need to have in place, which is related to the plan and in getting people engaged and aligned, is you've got to provide tools and aids and support the employees and the team and the organization in its effort to change. It's not enough to say we're going to change. You've got to provide people with tools and ways to help them to be able to do it. And lastly, you've got to actively manage change. I talked to that earlier. You can't leave change to chance. Like leaving your culture to chance, it invites challenges and invites change that probably won't be successful. So you have to actively manage the change. You can't just let it run on autopilot. So those are the four critical success factors in terms of how I would address that question.
So I have a question for you.
Yes.
In your experience, from the three things you talked about, like addressing the clutter, harmony, or uncovering opportunities, which is the hardest to attain?
I think I think the harmony one may be the biggest challenge. Because of the natural tendency when things go wrong, we look for things to blame or people to blame. And so it really comes back to having the right mindset there. So the harmony one can be quite often to achieve. However, that is the one that probably has the biggest return on investment if you can perfect that. We all know based on business process improvement and changing how we do things in processes leads to improvement. That's pretty self-evident. But when it comes to achieving harmony, once you get there, the return on investment is immense. And from a problem solving standpoint, having the right mindset and recognizing that opportunities do exist in difficulty and opportunity, and that quite often the biggest breaks come when we've got a problem.
Sure thing. So now I have another question. How do you help guide a team that gets stuck in the swamp of change to get forward movement again?
Great question. One of the things that you do ahead of time before you ever put people out into that state between as is and to be, the swamp and change, is to do some work and understand attitudes and perceptions of the organization and people going into the change effort. I did some work a number of years ago for a major equipment manufacturer, and we were helping them install new processes and technology worldwide into their product development space. And there were 37 business units that were going to embrace these new processes and technology to make product development more efficient worldwide, because they were doing it in 37 business units in 10 different languages. So there was a lot of tribal knowledge going on. So they wanted to streamline all that and make collaboration more of an outcome. One of the things we did as each business unit came on to start using these processes and technologies, we anticipated what are going to be the change management challenges. Are the people in this business going to enthusiastic adopt them, or we're going to look for what they might resist or have opposition to? So we did cultural and perception surveys. We did a survey of their culture to understand what might be in the culture that's going to cause some resistance, and then also some individual perception surveys to see and get a feel for whether our people are going to eagerly adopt it. And if they are, that's good. But if we detected there would be some resistance, then we would want to address that even before we even get into the swamp of change. To directly answer your question, once you're in the swamp of change, the important thing, well, first of all, if you can do those kinds of things I just described, it's sort of like prepare before failure. You want to prevent it rather than fix it once people are out there. But if you find yourself in the swamp and there's some stuckness going on and people are stuck in that area, the best thing to do is to acknowledge that there's a challenge. Make sure that you're practicing transparency. And back to that third critical success factor, re-examine, are we giving people the right tools and support to get them through the swamp of change? So we constantly evaluate all those critical success factors, and particularly, are they getting the right support to help them through the swamp?
And I do not have any more, excepting there is one comment to say, how long will we be able to view the recorded version? A lot to ponder. So I know that the posted recording will be there for 30 days after the conference on the site, so you can review that within that time period. And otherwise, there are tons of compliments flowing for the presentation, and they've really valued what you've just talked. And people are saying that there's a lot to consider about it. So thank you so much, Mark. If there's any parting word of wisdom, I'll let you take the floor, and then otherwise we can end the slide. End
Well,
the
thank you, and thank you for the feedback. And again, feel free, folks, to please go and give me some feedback. And if you want to contact me, I think my contact information is out there as part of this overall conference. I welcome anyone to contact me directly, even if you just have a question, no obligation. And what I admittedly threw a lot of stuff at all of you. I covered a lot of ground in a short amount of time, but my purpose was to give everyone at least one takeaway, depending on where you are in your organization and what challenges or things that you're faced with. So hopefully you'll have at least one takeaway from all of it. And yeah, sometimes the best thing to do is to sit back and absorb it all. So take a look at the slides, because they'll be available. And again, feel free to contact me. And I appreciate the opportunity today. And thank you all for being attentive and giving me your ear and your eyes.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Have a great day.